This video is part of the asynchronous content that will link to the September 11th class. It follows just on the footsteps of the previous video where we plotted x, y coordinates. Remember taking what was just a piece of paper or information on a table, and then using the coordinates we ended up creating a point, creating something from nothing. We'll do something similar here through the use of the edit tool. Right? It's a tool that's going to allow us to draw shapes, to draw polygons, to draw points from nothing and then put new information in them. It's a very commonly used tool when you need to create new data or when you need to edit existing data. Now, anytime we're building something from scratch, right, you're creating something new, you always need to store it first. And it always begins here in folders, on your desktop. And that makes sense, right? If you don't have anything yet and you need to have something, it's got to be stored somewhere, just like a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation or whatever. So, it's always good to just keep that in mind. Most of the stuff that we do with mapping and such is here, right, within the mapping interface or here or up here with the tools, but creating content happens here. And you use it through the magic of right-click. Come on to Edit XY, right-click, and we'll go to New, and pick Shapefile. Thing will come up. This will automatically populate. That's just saying, hey, this is where I'm storing. We could give it a name. We'll call it maybe my file. You could choose what type of vector geometry you want, point, line, polygon. Let's pick polygon. Template feature class is just if you have another feature or shapefile that you want it to look like and act like. Don't worry about M and Z. And let's pick the coordinate system with Philly correct. We want it to match up. You could obviously come here and click on this and pick your own manually if you wanted. But we'll pick Philly correct. We'll hit run. Right, here it comes. I've got my file, and there's no shapes. And if I open the attribute table, there's no information. And that makes sense because we haven't created anything. It's just a vessel, right? It's the potential for geography eventually. The other thing I want you to do is I want you to right-click on Edit XY, come to New, and I want you to create a new geodatabase. So a geodatabase, and I'll call it MyGDB. Think about it like a repository or a folder that was perfectly designed for ArcGIS. It is a way to store data more efficiently and store a higher volume of data and have it run faster. It allows you to build linkages between different data sources that call on one another much quicker. And it allows you to really do cool tricks like that control editing in a little more specific and detailed way than we're going to show at first. And, just like any other folder, you can populate it with things. You can import shapefiles into it. When they come into a geodatabase, they're called a feature class, but don't worry, they're one and the same. You can create a new feature class, just like we created sort of a new shapefile. So we won't dive too deeply into this outside of discussing its creation and showing a quick trick at the end of this video. We'll pop it back in a little next week, and then those that are more interested, I'll link you up to additional content on the YouTube channel about geodatabases in particular. But for now, let's play around with my file. So, first lesson to edit is you cannot add rows and columns at the same time. It's been a sort of a weird feature or a bug, depending on how you want to categorize it, since the inception of ArcGIS. But you can add rows, which are the geography, the things, the neighborhoods, the points, so on and so forth, and columns, the attributes, the information simultaneously. So it's actually really good when you're starting to edit to come in and add some columns first. This will take up most of next week. Let me rephrase that. We're not going to spend all of next week adding fields, but this will be a huge component, right? How you add fields, delete them, edit them, create them, calculate them. And easiest way to do it is here. We'll return in far more depth next week. I opened right-clicked my file and hit Open Attribute. and I could just add a field. Whenever you do that, the field window pops up. Let's just add a super simple one here that is maybe like, I don't know, color. We'll go through data type next week. Not something we'll do today. Long and shorter numbers, float and double are decimals. Just pick text for now. It's going to say 255 is the max amount of text that you have. Green means I created a new one. I have to come up here and hit save. Bing, bada, boom. And there it is, waiting for me to populate it. So now that we've kind of created that, now we can actually come in and start messing around with the data. And so the way that you want to edit anything is you select it here, and then you come on over to edit. Now there is a vast array of editing tools, just as there would be in Illustrator or anything else when you're sort of drawing content. We'll pop into this regularly throughout the semester. For this video today, I'm just going to show you sort of the basics to get you started, and then you should feel free to explore. Really, it's broken down into a couple areas, I think, that are the most critical for you. These aren't highlighted yet, save and discard, but they will be. This is basically what you need to change when you want to save a shape you've drawn. It's important to note that this up here, saving your map, doesn't save the data. When you use edit, you're breaking apart data or reconstructing data. And so you need to tell it to save the changes you made. If you drew a bunch of shapes or edited the shape of Philly or whatever you chose to do, and then this crashed, you wouldn't sort of have those changes anymore. This here, create and modify, is basically how you either create new from scratch or by selecting something that's existing. Like I could select Philly and modify it, modify something that's there. So when we're ready to start, that's what we're going to sort of create. And these are all sort of the things you can mess around with, right? You can take a shape that exists and move it. You can edit the vertices to go in and out. You can reshape it. You can merge it with another tool. You can split it with a line, right? They go on and they on and on and on and on and on and on. More than we're really going to focus on in class, but those who find this interesting and really want to get detailed, I highly suggest doing a little bit of trial and error. Play around with the shapes that you're sort of creating here and see what split does and see what generalized does and so on and so forth. Well, let's start nice and simple here, right? If we come on over here to create, the first window that pops up is what do you want to create? What do you want to draw? And what I'm going to start with is my file. What this is basically the different shapes. Now you will almost always use this one, right? Polygon. You'll just draw the vertices. But if you know you're going to draw circles, you could draw the circle. If you want to be like a crazy freehand artist, you could be a freehand artist, right? If you want to draw freehand polygons that will complete themselves automatically, if you want to trace over an existing sort of shape, right? This is one option to play with, so on and so forth. And I think what I may do after this week is load on the YouTube channel, like an optional video for you to watch that just walks through some of the more advanced techniques here. But let's start in the basics with that. Suddenly my mouse disappeared. You could squint on the screen and probably see that it's turned into crosshairs. And here I go. Crosshair and a crosshair and a crosshair and a crosshair, and keep clicking, and a shape is making itself. And when I double click, I've created my shape. And I could come into the color of my shape over here, and I could call it blue cheese. That's not a color, but what the heck, it's what I wanted to write. And there it is. There's other ways to play around with your shapes too, right? I could come here and try to draw an arc segment, right? So maybe if I clicked on this arc segment, and then I drew one line and another line, and I could pull it back, and there I'd have, double click, and I'd have an arc segment, right? I don't really like this shape anymore, the first one, so I could go to select and select this shape. I could take move and move it over here. Whoop. Theoretically, why did you not move? Make me look foolish. Sometimes it takes that good. Moving a little bit, moving at a snail's pace. Moving at a snail's pace. I could do that same thing, select, and I could edit the vertices. And these vertices will come up, and I can drag them inward if I want to, right? So that's editing those existing shapes. And another cool thing you can start to do when you're drawing something, I'll bring Philly back in here to show, is you actually, when you're creating new content, you can use that great, powerful right-click again. Come on in here and right-click, and you have all these cool options for how you go, right? I could say, make my compass direction, okay, not what I wanted. I thought we were going to do compass direction. None of this makes sense to me. I'm going to have to come back to this one, foot and mouth sort of shay here. I thought that would show me the 360. So I got to figure out what those sort of units are. But once I do, you can use it. The idea here being that you could actually pick a direction and head in that. You could also pick a distance and maybe say you can be exactly, a 2-mile segment. And the cool thing is, right, I can go in any direction I want, but if you're looking at my line, it never changes, right? I don't change it no matter how far I come out, it stays 2 miles. Right, so there's ways to kind of control how things look. You can also make them really cool by clicking on another shape, right? I could come here and click on the line, and I could say, hey, be parallel to that line. And as I keep coming, I can go any direction I want, but I can't sort of break that parallel plane. Right, so that's editing. That's the basics of it. If you don't like what you created, you can select it and right-click it. You can delete it. And a lot of cool stuff you should be able to do and play around with these tools on editing. The last thing I'll say before we sort of pause or go to the final step of this video and then leave you to really explore this on your own is you got to hit this. Right? If you don't hit save, then the shapes, nothing that you drew actually exists or sort of remains beyond what you've done here. So it's important to say save. Once it's grayed out, it'll mean that your sort of work has been done. So the last thing that I'll show you on this video here, and I'm going to close these little mini videos, one that came open, is sort of why the geodatabases are really cool and fascinating tools. And one of the reasons is this thing called a domain. So if you were to right-click and you could create this yourself, there's a video on my YouTube channel that walks through this. This won't be something we talk about in detail here, but I wanted to show you the possibilities of a geodatabase. I created this domain. I said it's a coded field, and then I made these codes. And what I've done here is create a drop-down menu, or create the rules for a drop-down menu. So then when I came in here and I created, right-clicked, and I created a new feature class called site markings, I told it to take on that domain. And what it means is that if I drag it in, you can see there is no data associated with it. No data, no points. But even without that, I can come to symbology, right-click symbology. And don't worry if this doesn't seem familiar. We haven't done our sort of in-depth look at symbology yet. But I could come here to unique values, which just means take a value that exists in the data and give a color to it. I could say site marking. And even though there's no data, because I built a drop-down of the type of data, the categories I want, I could add them all. And there we go. I know that there are 4 things I can be. A tree, utility, community garden, a charging station. It shows up on my legend. And now when I start editing, I have the option to just pick. And it's really cool, right? I can open the site markings just to show you how this works. And I could come and be like, okay, a community garden is right here. And there it goes, right? It put the word community garden in there, and it should take on the color of community garden. And then maybe a utility pole is right here. And community garden, and then it takes on utility pole. So the purpose of the domain, why it's really cool, is that drop-down menu. It's when you sort of have a more standardized way of editing, and you want to be able to control what goes in an attribute table, or control the way something looks.